and welcome back to the Tesla project, and specifically welcome back to the Tesla Gen 3 battery charger. It has been some time now since we have had a look at a piece of Tesla hardware in general and at the Gen 3 charger in particular. So what you might see on the bench today is you'll see that I've actually got two of them. The one that we're working on is a EU spec charger, so it's configured for single and three phase input, and the one I've got buried underneath here is a North American spec, which is designed for single phase input only. So we will be doing another video in the future where we're just going to do a quick little comparison between the two of them. But I've just had to cover off this briefly today to check, and with the exception of some differences in the high voltage junction box section, things are pretty much the same. So when we last looked at the Gen 3 charger, we had basically worked out that we could get it to turn on. We could get it to initiate a charge just by providing CAN messages to the power modules, which would in fact be the same CAN messages as we use on the Gen 2. And what you will see here that I've got rigged up is I have a Gen 2, one of the Gen 2 open source logic boards here rigged up, and I've got its power module CAN bus connected to the power module CAN bus here. We've got a CAN DUI board here, also monitoring both the internal power module CAN, and I've been doing some testing on the external CAN from the Tesla stock logic board too, because kind of the next logical step that I have to take is figuring out how to implement a control over this particular charger. Now, as some of you who will be familiar with the Gen 2 charger know, we were able to design a replacement logic board for that, which is basically this guy here. And it's just mounted with 6 screws and a couple of multi-way connectors, and it's very easy to swap out. So people that want to run a Gen 2 charger merely have to take the cover off, take out the 6 screws, disconnect a wiring plug, replace that with one of my boards here, put it all together, and you've got complete control over how the charger works. So, problem with the Gen 3 is that I suppose it's a much more integrated design insofar as that they've integrated the charger power modules, the high voltage junction box, the contactors, and the logic board into one container. Also, these are a more powerful charger. I believe this one can go up to 26 amps DC per module, so I think that's pretty, I suppose it's 70, I don't know, about 75 amps or more, and you know, so it's kind of a nice thing to be able to use. And you know, as Tesla make more cars, obviously they'll be fitting these chargers to them, so they're kind of something that we really do want to be able to use. And in particular for myself, I have a build coming up at the minute for a dedicated track car, so I need a powerful and compact charger for that. So this guy here is going to be pressed into service for my track car build. Now, with that said, then it's kind of given me the push that I needed to basically start looking at how we're going to control it. So what I've done here is, as I say, I've rigged up a Gen 2 logic board so that I could just see that the control of the modules is the exact same. And I'm pleased to say that, with the exception of merely having to increase the message that sends the current request on the charger, it is exactly the same. So on a very crude basis, one could just kind of glue that board on here and you'd be all set. Now, to go into a little bit more detail, each of the power modules connects to the logic board here by means of 8 soldered on pins here, so it's probably a little bit difficult to see. I'll try and get you guys in, but it's the same on all 3 of the power modules, and I've just tapped into one of them here so that I can connect and do some experiments. So from left to right, just to give you guys a quick overview on this again, the leftmost terminal here is 12 volts, the second one is ground, the third one is the enable line that basically turns on the power module. So when you supply 3 volts to that, the power module turns on. The fourth pin is the phase enable line, so you have to provide again 5 volts to that. It's kind of a hardware interlock on the phase module, so you basically provide that 5 volts and send it to CAN messages, and it goes through its initialization routine then to start charging, assuming it sees high voltage DC and AC on at the appropriate time. The fifth pin then is CAN low, sixth one's CAN high, pin 7's the mystery pin, very same as on the Gen 2, I've no idea what it does, and pin 8 then, the last one here, is a 5 volt supply for the kind of a logic section on here. And at once the module sees 12 volts, 5 volts and an enable signal, it basically wakes up, turns on its little red LED here and starts spitting out status messages on the CAN bus. So basically all 3 of the modules work the same. They have separate CAN IDs for each one, and they're the exact same as they are on the Gen 2. Now what, to kind of get back to the main point here that we need to do is we need a way to integrate a control mechanism in here, and that's kind of what I've been looking at today here. So looking at the original logic board without major butchery, and I do mean major butchery, having to go cutting out the aluminium front here and doing a lot of nasty kind of chopping work, it's not really going to be possible for us to remove this existing stock logic board. I did have a quick look in here just with a little snake camera thing, and there's actually the DC fuses are in underneath there, so don't blow your DC fuses because you won't really be able to replace them because they're stuck in there. Which is kind of silly, Elon, but hey, you know. Right. So, oh yeah, one last thing, sorry, is there's a multi-way plug here that basically has a cable bundle. It goes down to the high voltage junction box and the contactors section there. So in another video we'll basically take all that stuff out. It is quite easy to take that out, and we'll figure out what all these wires do. Might as well, so that we can future-proof the design for doing DC charging. So anyway, back to the main point finally, is I've been trying to work out a way to do this. Now there's a little anomaly with the existing logic board here that I think we're going to be able to exploit. When one applies 12 volts and ground, so just what would be the normal battery permanent 12 volt supply, so that's pin 1 on this little multi-way socket here, which you can't see, but it's just on the front of the charger, and chassis ground. It supplies 12 volts to the power modules, and it supplies the 3 volt enable signal. It does not supply the 5 volt logic. So what will happen is the modules come on, the red LEDs come on, but we don't get any CAN messages. Now if we supply the 5 volts here ourselves from a separate power supply, the modules come alive and they start spitting out CAN. And what we could then do was to supply the charge enable signal as well, and you know, we can spit the CAN messages in there, put a high voltage on there. I've got my 9 volt battery of death rigged up at the minute, and it basically reads out here. I've just got the computer connected to the serial port on the logic board, and it basically just reads out everything and commands the charger modules. I'm reading the module temperatures, the DC voltage, the whole lot there, the statuses, everything, and it's yeah, I mean, it's just working away fine. Now this is a little bit weird because on the Gen 2 charger, when you applied 12 volts, it woke everything up fully. So the logic board came on, the power modules were powered up. They stayed powered up for about 5 to 6 seconds, and then the whole thing went asleep. So if we simply provide 12 volts and ground, the logic board looks to basically hang in this particular state. Now what I then did was I connected to the external CAN bus. Let me bring you guys around here. A bit more dodgy too. I connected to the external CAN bus, which is pins, I can find this here. Oh, so many notes, so many projects. Pin 14 is CAN high and pin 4 is CAN low. Connected on there, and it doesn't send out any CAN messages at all. So then I decided to throw a CAN capture at it, and that drove it a little bit balmy. It started turning on and off the power modules and started sending commands onto the power module CAN bus. So I thought, okay, let's stop sending commands to it, and lo and behold, about 5 or 6 seconds later, it powers down and goes asleep. So it looks like there's a little bit of a glitch here, that if you don't send it any CAN messages, it basically sits there looking for them, which is, you know, kind of weird, but I think that's something that we can potentially exploit. Alright. So what the route that I think I'm going to take here is that we're going to leave the stock logic board in there, and we're going to design the smallest possible open source logic board kind of version of this guy, and either have it probably mount here on the side in a little enclosure with its own amp seal socket on it, and land that through into the charger casing and basically come off one of the modules here, because fortunately the CAN bus, the 12 volt and the 5 volt lines are common, so they go across all of the modules. So we would then only need to supply the two enable signals separately. So that's going to be my next port of call, is going to be to look at a tidy little add-on box that can either sit on the side, or if you prefer can sit on the lid of the charger, and basically provide, you know, EV SE control, control the power modules, send them the CAN messages, and control our high voltage junction box contactors as well. Now, one of the things I'm going to address straight away is, because I know this is going to be a very common question I'm going to get asked, is why don't I just figure out how to make the original Tesla logic board work? Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one is not sure how that would actually work for me. I do have access to CAN captures, some info about some of the CAN IDs. I have a pin out for the connector, so we could go down that road and start, you know, trying to synchronize the EVSE signals and the, you know, the various high voltage interlocks and all that type of thing. But even if I were successful with that, I think it would limit the usability of the charger too much. You would be then kind of wedded to only being able to use it with a charging point, only able to use it in a single charger application, and I think worse, you would be then wedded to whatever firmware version that I happen to have here that works, and then in a year's time Tesla release a new firmware version, and all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. So I kind of prefer the hardware solution for that reason, and it does open up the usability of the charger as well for being used in master-slave setups, being used without EVSEs. I just, to me, it also eliminates a lot of the problems that you get when you're trying to make one particular aspect of a system work. So that is the route that we're going to be taking. Sorry, this is going to be a bit of a long video, but it's kind of a lot of stuff I want to get out there. I want to just get you guys to know where my head is in terms of working this project out. So just, I'll give you a little bit of a close-up, seeing as we're here. So right now on the screen of the laptop, I don't know how this is going to come out, but we're basically able to see there that all three of the modules are reporting the voltage from my 9-volt battery of death, which is around 235 volts at the minute. We've no AC voltage coming in. We have the temperatures here, the modules being about 23 degrees, and the rest of it is just kind of status information and so forth there. So just for a close-up, just so you can see, this is our logic board here. This is the plug then that leads back to the high voltage junction box. That's that big kind of orange plastic area there. And this is the front connector on the charger that I was referring to earlier. So we're going to be having a look at how we go about you know, coming up with a neat kind of an add-on box here. Be something that'll mount on the side, you know, something tidy here. Has a nice flat surface, so we can go in through there then and bring a wire up to our number 1 or number 3 actually phase module to pick up most of the connections that we're going to need. So I will leave you guys there. Sorry, this is kind of turned into a bit of a longer video than I had planned, but just a bit of info there on the Gen 3 charger for you as well. We'll be back with this project fairly soon when we start getting the basics of a logic board designed. That will be, of course, open source and available on my GitHub should you wish to follow along. So until then, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and check the links in the description to my PayPal and Patreon should you wish to financially support any of these mad projects. Also, there'll be a link in there to my GitHub where we have all the designs for the various open source logic boards and projects that I've released. And yeah, that's about it. So until next time then, guys, happy logic board designing.